My name is David Wilson. I serve as Dean of the Goldman School of Public Policy and a professor of public policy and political science here at UC Berkeley. I am thrilled and excited to have you joining us for our second ever annual Berkeley Public Policy Conference and Alumni Gathering. Round of applause for this idea, this concept. There is a lot of activity behind the scenes to make this work, and the purpose of this event is for us to actually live, re-engage, practice, develop, inspire our mission to serve the public good, to be the leading intellectual home for solving the most intractable public problems that exist in our society. To do that, we have to actually mobilize our students, our faculty, our staff, our alumni, our advisors, the friends of our university, all of our networks and our partnerships to come together to get on the same page and have common understanding that the public matters, that people matter. So we're thrilled today to have over 14 incredible sessions, 2 keynote panels, 8 panel discussions, 4 workshops, all featuring our Goldman School community. We also have many policymakers here. We have practitioners in the field. We have new partners. They're all looking at these issues and looking for us to be a real resource for change making for the public good. Now, I don't know, where's Elizabeth? She was right here, she's not here. Where's Elizabeth Mart? She's probably in the hallway. Elizabeth, Annie Campbell-Washington, stand up. Members of the conference committee that did all the planning work here, stand up. Before anything happens, we have to thank you for helping us put this together. This is critical to our mission. All right, so I just wanted to welcome you, say thank you for being here, be inspired, think about, when you experience things today, think about how you can actually help to accelerate impact, find that thing that you want to change, find your delta, find that thing that you can help have impact on. Now, to get us kicked off, I'm going to invite Kelsey Horn, one of our MPA students. There you are, Kelsey. You're like a ninja sneaking around here. Welcome, Kelsey Horn, our MPA graduate student. Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you. Welcome. Do good things.
Thank you, Dean Wilson, and good morning, everyone. So I'm honored to be here with you all today, but before we get started with today's events, the Goldman School of Public Policy would like to recognize UC Berkeley sits on the territory of the Huichin, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, the successors of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Muwekma Ohlone tribe and the familial descendants of the Verona Band. We recognize that every member of the Berkeley community has benefited, continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land and the institution's founding since 1868. Consistent with our values of the community of inclusion and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship with the Native peoples. As members of the Berkeley community, it is vitally important that we not only recognize the history of the land on which we stand, but also recognize the Muwekma Ohlone people are alive and flourishing members of the Berkeley and broader Bay Area communities today. And now, I have the privilege of introducing our keynote speaker, Hilary Hoynes. Hilary Hoynes is the Chancellor's Professor of Economics and Public Policy at the University of California Berkeley and currently serves as Associate Dean of the Goldman School of Public Policy. An economist who works on poverty, inequality, and the social safety net, Professor Hoynes' research examines how access to social safety net in early life affects children's later life health and human capital outcomes. Professor Hoynes also serves as the director of Berkeley Opportunity Lab, a leading research hub for scholars at UC Berkeley dedicated to examining social and economic inequality in the U.S. She co-directs the James M. and Kathleen D. Stone Center on Wealth and Income Inequality, which investigates disparities in wealth and income. Hoynes' career highlights include being selected to the National Academy of Sciences, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the National Academy of Social Insurance, and her recognition as a fellow of the Society of Labor Economists. This year, Professor Hoynes was awarded the 2024 Daniel M. Holland Medal of the National Tax Association. The NTA's most prestigious award recognizes Hoynes' pioneering research in child poverty and the social safety net, which has influenced the field by offering new insights into long-term benefits of social welfare programs. She is the second Berkeley economist to receive this honor and the third woman to receive it since 1993. Please join me in welcoming Professor Hilary Hoynes.
Wow. Thank you, Kelsey. That was amazing. I think I can just stand up and sit down. I want to offer another welcome to everybody today. I'm very excited about our second annual conference and alumni gathering here. So I hope you all have your plans set out for how you're going to spend today on the variety of incredible panels, lunchtime keynotes, and so on. So again, I'm Hilary Hoynes. I've been a professor at the Goldman School since 2013. I have the great honor of teaching an elective that Henry Brady empowered me to develop called Poverty, Inequality, and the Social Safety Net. I've also spent time teaching some cohorts of core MPP first-year econ. And what I want to talk to you about today is some work that I've been doing and some reflection that I've been doing about the intersection between my academic work and the policy-facing work that I've been doing on child poverty, and in particular, how we talk about how social safety nets affect child poverty and the implications for the way we talk about that for whether or not, and I would say that we are, underinvesting in these policies currently in the United States. So the title of the talk is Child Poverty, Where Have We Been and How Can We Do Better? And in particular, what I want to do is call attention to how the policy discussions and the research around the social safety net and poverty have gotten it wrong and how we can do better. So to start, just 3 days ago, on September 10th, the US Census released, which it does annually, its report on poverty in the United States. So here are some of the headline numbers. Overall, 12.9% of Americans are poor. That amounts to 43 million people. In this talk, I'm focusing in particular on children and their relationship to the social safety net and their poverty. And for children, 13.7% of American children are poor. That amounts to about 10 million children. And what we've seen consistently over the decades is that child poverty rates are systematically and perhaps structurally higher for Hispanic, Black, American Indian, Alaska Native children compared to white children. Now, while these poverty rates are high, and I'm going to talk about that more, it is important to point out that our social safety net does reduce poverty. The social safety net that we have in America is effective at reducing poverty. So that same US Census data that came out 3 days ago reports that the tax credits, the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit, lifted 4.8 million children out of poverty. And those tax credits are our biggest anti-poverty programs in America. SNAP, or what we call in California CalFresh, lifted another 1.4 million children out of poverty, the census data shows. And the biggest anti-poverty program in America is actually Social Security, that does touch many children, but more importantly, really lifts many millions of elders out of poverty. So stepping back from these basic statistics that were released just a few days ago, if you compare the United States to other countries, we consistently appear as one of the top child poverty rate countries. While in general, you see a pattern across countries that the higher the GDP per capita, the lower the poverty rates in those countries, the United States has been consistently an outlier where we systematically have quite high GDP per capita, but also persistently quite high, in particular, child poverty rates. Less elder poverty rates, which were about at the median, but systematically higher poverty rates for children. So, for example, the United States poverty rate is about 50% higher than, say, France or Germany. And you might be saying, well, why is that? Well, it's pretty simple. The United States spends a much smaller share of our GDP on programs that assist families with children compared to other rich countries. So according to the OECD, the US spends about 0.5% of our GDP on what the OECD labels as family assistance, that's the category. And that puts us in a similar frame as Turkey and Mexico. This compares to 3.5% of GDP in Denmark, 3% in France, and 2.5% in Germany. Now, I'm sure many of you are in your seats saying, hey, Hilary, wasn't the US one of the big spenders in the COVID pandemic? Didn't I hear about all this additional spending and maybe the child tax credit? And didn't I hear some things about the effectiveness of that with respect to child poverty? Was that a game changer for the United States? Well, yes and no. So it is in fact true that the United States had an incredibly robust response to the COVID recession. And this included, as I'm sure we all know, economic stimulus payments, historic expansions of the unemployment insurance system, quite robust expansions of SNAP, or CalFresh in California, and the expansion of the federal child tax credit. So in that context, what happened? So in 2019, on the eve of what we now know was coming in 2020, at the end of a very long economic expansion throughout most of that decade, the child poverty rate was 12.6%, not very different from what it is today. In 2020, after the first round of pandemic aid, child poverty was 9.7%. In 2021, after the second round of pandemic aid, including the record expansion of the child tax credit, the child poverty rate fell to 5.2%. By far the lowest rate in recorded history, and we've been measuring poverty since the early 1960s. So I can tell you that poverty rates don't generally decline during recessions. If you look at the data over 50 years in the post-war period, you see consistently when unemployment rates go up, child poverty and poverty more generally go up. So I think that this data shows on the surface, and of course there's a lot more important analytics below it, is that poverty is a policy choice. And overall, it's just not very complicated. If you spend more, poverty is lower. And this is evident if you look across countries and compare their spending and their poverty rates. It's also evident when you look within countries, such as the example, important example, of the COVID recession. But these pandemic policies were temporary. Now, as of the 2013 data that was just released earlier this week, and poverty is measured annually, so it's over the 2013 calendar year, the child poverty rate is now back to where it was, and in fact increased a bit over the 2019 pre-pandemic levels, up to 13.7%. So with that sort of groundwork of the data and the recent history, I want to dig in a little bit to the 2021 child tax credit expansion and talk about it as an example of what we've done wrong and what we can do right. So why do I focus on this expansion? One, it led to the largest reduction in child poverty in US history. Two, it continues to get significant attention in Congress and also in the current election, where both Harris and Trump are talking about the child tax credit. So the child tax credit is not new. It started in 1997 as a modest $400 per child non-refundable tax credit. It's been expanded many times, and most recently, prior to that 2021 expansion, it was increased to $2,000 per child as part of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Now, the 2021 expansion of the credit had two really important features. The first is it was made what's called fully refundable. We don't need to get into tax jargon. It's all a bit boring. But the bottom line of when a program is referred to as fully refundable, it means that the families could receive the credit and the full value of the credit even if they had very low or no income. Previously to that expansion, and since its expiration under current law, it turns out that the child tax credit is phased in such a way that you can be a minimum wage worker, perhaps not in California as a high minimum wage state, but in many parts of the United States, and work full time and not earn enough to get the full child tax credit. In fact, estimates show that 35% of children live in families where their incomes are too low to gain the full value of the child tax credit. On the other hand, it's available to such high income groups, so if you're a married couple with children, the phase out starts around $400,000 a year. Only 2% of children live in families where incomes are too high to be eligible for the child tax credit. So the first thing that the 2021 expansion did is it made it universal to those with lower income. It's eventually phased out, but it's universal at the bottom. And that is something we have never done before in any cash-like safety net program in the United States. Number two, the policy was expanded to a higher level above the $2,000 under current law and previous law. So it was increased to $3,600 per child if your child was under 6, or $3,000 if your child was over 6. So those are the two features that were really critical in the expansion of the credit. And the data shows that if the credit had not been expanded, then the child poverty rate would have fallen between 2020 and 2021 from 9.7 to 8.1%. With the policy, as I said before, it fell from 9.7 to 5.2%. So this means that this one policy change led to 2 million children being lifted out of poverty. So despite that success of the 2021 child tax credit expansion, the policy was not made permanent. It was debated. It was originally part of the Build Back Better plan, then that was peeled off, and it was discussed and debated in Congress, actually went to a vote in the Senate. Notably, for those of you who were paying attention to that debate and discussion, the overwhelming press coverage and policy conversation when discussing the child tax credit and whether it should be expanded was focused on one issue. And that issue was how the credit would affect the employment and earnings and labor market decisions of the parents. So there was a lot of debate about how many jobs would disappear because folks would withdraw from the labor market. And that was critical in the conversations for those who were, at least on the surface, their arguments for opposing the credit. So it is at that nugget, at that center, at that core, that I want to build as the theme in this talk. So I want to point out that both the policy conversations and debates and the press coverage around it and the research around these policies more generally have gotten it wrong and how we can do better. And at that core, what I have noticed where I sit today and throughout my career, I've sort of been studying these things for a long time. Some academics move around and study different things. I'm a bit of a broken record and have been essentially studying child poverty and the social safety net my whole career. But what I focused on, this is an I thing, not a you thing, what I focused on and what I now observe we were doing for much of my career, and I should note in the many decades before it, whenever we studied safety net programs, we focused on one thing, and that was, how do these programs affect incentives? How does the way we structure a social safety net program affect what happens in its delivery? When I try to transfer resources to your family, are you gonna lower your work attachment as part of that, as a consequence of that? Or is this a kind of policy that's gonna draw you into the labor market? So all the focus has historically been, and as I mentioned, was central in the discussion of the child tax credit in the 2021 debate, has been focused on essentially what kinds of decisions are parents making as part of the delivery of these programs. And the research that I've observed over my 30 plus years of studying this is that that's what researchers were focusing. That's what I was focused on. And at the same time, there was almost no research, again, this is a bit of a looking backwards exercise, on the benefits of these programs. So very little about how the tax credits, cash welfare, food stamps, Medicaid, housing programs affect the well-being of families with children. So the focus has been on incentives, and we see that, I saw that in my research community, and I've observed that in the policy discussions and in the press accounts. Now, I'm not here to solve the causality problem of which thing caused what. Was it the research focus on the incentive that affected the policy focus, or was it the policy focus on incentives that affected the research? I don't know. I'll have to get Avi working on that solution. I see you back in the room. You can work on that. But I think the bottom line is it's absolutely critical for what we've seen take place in terms of just to what extent we've invested in the social safety net, how far behind we are from other countries, and therefore how persistently high are child poverty rates. So in a recent study, two co-authors and myself wanted to investigate this a little bit more quantitatively. And so what we did is we accessed 50 years of academic journals. We took every single article that had been published over those 50 years in a set of journals, and we tagged the ones that studied anti-poverty policy for families with children. And then we asked what share of those studies focused on incentives versus the benefits of the program. And what we found was between 1970 and 2010, 3/4 of the studies that had been published were focused on incentives. And almost, the vast majority of those were focused on work. How does a policy affect work? I have to be honest that until quite recently, I never even noticed this. But from where I sit now, it's very strange, and I think hugely problematic for designing and implementing effective anti-poverty policies. The focus on incentives may be, and I don't know if this is causally true, an important factor in our historic low amount of spending with families with children compared to other rich countries. So why? Can I say a little more about why I think this is problematic in terms of the focus on incentives? Well, if we focus on the impacts of the social safety net on how it affects work, and we limit the analysis, therefore, to the costs of delivering these programs. And anyone in this room who's taken my social safety net class knows that, we talk about how these programs affect incentives is like something you need to bake into the costs of doing business, the costs of doing redistribution. But how many people in this room have taken a cost-benefit analysis class at GSPP or benefit cost analysis or used those tools in your work? Well, it sure doesn't make much sense if you're spending all your time quantifying the costs and not quantifying the benefits. How can you analyze? I mean, it's evident, it's so obvious. But how can we study whether we're doing too much or not enough of something if we spend all of our time quantifying costs and none of our time quantifying benefits? So that's what we've been doing wrong. And that's where we can do better. So I could stop here, but that would be very depressing. And I don't want to do that. Happily, I can report that the focus has really changed. So those who might be paying close attention, I know it's early, so I don't know how many of you are paying close attention. I said before, from 1970 to 2010, 3/4 of the studies had focused on incentives. Well, if we look at the last decade in our data, what we see is a complete reversal. In the last decade of the data we collected on academic journal publications on anti-poverty programs, we see that 3/4 of the studies are focused on the benefits of the program, and 1/4 of the studies are focused on the cost. So the good news is we're really catching up, we're really learning a lot, and I think that's been very important. So let me tell you a little bit about that. So the research shows overall that spending on children increases tremendously health and economic well-being of those children. So researchers have shown that more social safety net spending for children and also for pregnant mothers leads to, here's a kind of laundry list of the kinds of outcomes that have been looked at, leads to improvements in infant health, improvements in child health, food insecurity, school outcomes, maternal stress, and mental health. And powerfully, in the longer term, so having access to the social safety net or more of it in your childhood, leads to quite dramatic improvements in adult outcomes for those children, including higher education, better labor market, higher income levels, better housing and neighborhood conditions, lower contact with the criminal justice system, better health, and lower mortality. So with that evidence, we see that the research on the social safety net shows important short and long-term effects for children associated with which programs? The tax credits, SNAP, housing vouchers, Medicaid, and more. So it's clear from this work that there are benefits of the social safety net for children, and they're large. And we can think of them as benefits in children, but also benefits in our society in the long term. They pay benefits down the road that in terms of improved child outcomes, but that also pays back to taxpayers in the future in terms of higher taxes and lower spending on the part of the government. So I try to label this phenomenon, the social safety net, as an investment in children. So with that background and that information on what we've learned, here's where I think we're at. I started with the statement that I think that policy discussions and research around the social safety net and poverty have gotten it wrong and that we can do better. 2, I've noted that for many decades, the research and policy around anti-poverty programs have focused on incentives, centrally how they affect work. And if we only care about how programs incentivize work for parents, then we're going to underinvest in the safety net. And I would argue that that's what we've done. But 3rd, there's a new wave of research showing that these programs can affect a child's life trajectory and that they are a good investment in our future. So coming back to the child tax credit, how has that changed the policy debate? Okay, so I kind of buried the lead and already had mentioned that the child tax credit was not made permanent. And in fact, the discussion around the efficacy of making the child tax credit permanent did center on work. And in fact, Senator Manchin, who was the decisive no vote, cited the effects on employment as his biggest concern. But at the same time, proponents of the policy, for example, Senator Bennett of Colorado, very centrally as a proponent of it, were regularly making statements about what the additional income could do for parents and their children, And the reports in the press, when they were discussing the employment effects, would also discuss alongside the accepted view that spending more today means getting better outcomes tomorrow. So it's an improvement, it's a continuum, it's a movement forward. Just this morning, as I was reading over these notes, I heard a story on NPR about tax policies under Harris versus Trump, and the discussion of the child tax credit mentioned, quote, it was effective in reducing poverty and a sound investment in the future. None of that happened before. So here are just a few thoughts that I want to leave you with. First, everything that I've talked about today is focused on the benefits for children. We know much less about the long-term benefits for adults. And I think what we know suggests they're not as great. Number two, we still have a lot to learn about when in childhood and for which children these investments are most transformative. And third, just as a caution, quantifying the long-term benefits of things takes time, obviously. And we don't always have decades to wait. I'm thinking about Kara Hurst last night saying, I don't know everything and we can't wait. We got to push. We got to work at scale today. So we need to work harder to try to understand what the intervening outcomes are that we can measure in real time that can help us get some insights into which policies might be most transformative in the long run. So I hope that what this research has done is perhaps moved the United States a little bit away from what I think is a very present bias that we've seen in our policy debates. Evaluating the incentives of programs, you can do it right away. And evaluating the benefits, it takes more effort, takes more data, takes more time. And I hope that this work allows us to sort of move away from this present bias and do better to transform opportunities for children in the United States. So thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Annie Campbell-Washington, and I'm Senior Assistant Dean of Academic Programs and Dean of Students at the Goldman School of Public Policy. Welcome to each and every one of you. I have the best job on the planet, and right now my job is to really put our hands together to thank Dean Wilson and Kelsey for kicking us off today in such an inspiring way, and particularly to you, Professor Hoynes, for inspiring us about the future and making us feel just how important the work that we all do in this room is to the future of our country and the world. So thank you so much. Okay, so I hope you have all gotten your caffeine and your food and are ready to have an inspiring, exciting day. If not, you can actually pick up a little bit more on your way out to the next session. Your sessions will begin at 9:45 a.m., so you have a little bit of time to get there and get settled. Also, from 10:45 to 11:15 a.m., we will have coffee, tea, snacks available in the lobby in case you need a little extra boost of caffeine. And otherwise, we will see you right back here at lunchtime for our keynotes. The buffet will open just before 12:30, and then our program will kick off at 12:45. So don't be late. It's going to be a fantastic lunchtime, and we'll be digging into democracy policy with a panel of speakers, so you don't want to be late for that. All right, everyone, are you ready to have a great day? Yeah. All right, let's get going.